Hello, in this video we're going to look at part 4 of the listening paper in the Cambridge English First for Schools exam. Part 4 is the longest part of the listening test and it's the multiple choice test. You have 7 questions and for each question there are 3 possible answers. Now it's not quite the same as the short extracts at the beginning because here you don't have so many breaks in the listening. You have to be really aware of the place that you've reached in the listening. So like in the reading multiple choice, you had to know where to look for your answers. Here you need to know where to listen for them. Sometimes the interviewer will help if there's an interview between somebody presenting the show, and when the interviewer asks a question, it kind of means that you're going to the next question in the series. But it's always useful to keep an eye on the next question in the list. For example, if you're looking at question 25, but you know what 26 is about, if you hear something connected with that, you know that you've missed 25 and it's time to move on. So knowing where you are is quite important. So in a minute we're going to try the task, and for that you'll need the PDF and the MP3s. You'll find the links to them in the description. We're on page 64 of the PDF looking at sample paper 2, where we will hear part of an interview with a successful young swimmer called Helen Gibson. But before we listen, let's think a little bit more about the task itself. Before the listening, you'll have some time to look at the questions. I don't think you've really got enough time to look at the different answers that are available for each question, and even if you did, you wouldn't really be able to remember what they are for later anyway. So the really important thing is to look at the questions and maybe highlight the important words. Things like if you see first, something first, you might hear several things, but it's the first thing that we're listening for. You might hear you might have a question about what was the most difficult or the most interesting. So again, we will hear about several different things, but it's the thing that's the most whatever that's really important to listen for. And as always, be careful that you don't get distracted. If you hear something that seems to match one of the answers very easily, just be careful that they don't say but and then contradict themselves, leading you to a different answer. So when you're ready, try the task, then we'll come back together and we'll go through question by question, see where the answers themselves come from. Okay, so for number 24, why did Helen first take up swimming? The answer we want is C. She was advised to by her parents. Now, right at the beginning, we have a distraction for A, which was she wanted to compete against her brothers, where she says, I come from a pretty sporty family actually, and both my older brothers were strong swimmers. But that actually put her off. That's not why she took it up. She says later though, I actually took up running. That was my dad's sport and was something I could share with him. He'd take me running along by these canals. I was always a bit frightened of falling in, so he, my dad, and Mum convinced me to have some swimming coaching. So that's where we get the answer. She was advised to by her parents. The word parents doesn't appear, but she mentions her dad, she mentions her mum, and together that gives the answer. For number 25, Helen thinks she's been successful as a swimmer because A, she has the right attitude. In the middle of the next part, after so why did the swimming go so well, she says, I'm pretty focused generally. It's a very small bit of the listening and it's what gives us the answer. So you have to listen out for these key details. Then in 26, looking back on her training program as a schoolgirl, Helen, B, appreciates the effort of her coaches. Instead of saying appreciate, she says she's grateful. Fortunately, I had some amazing coaches who planned fun workouts. It's more productive that way and I'm grateful to them for that. So that's what we want for appreciate. And then in 27, just before a big race, Helen C follows a set exercise routine. She says, I always do the same series of stretches because they suit my body. She then says, I don't think about the other swimmers in the event, which is a little bit of a connection to B, where it says Helen worries about the other swimmers. They mention other swimmers, and if you're just listening for the same words here and here, you might be distracted by that. So like in the reading multiple choice, be very careful of word hunting. If you hear the same language in both places, the question and the listening, it's usually there to distract you. Then for number 28, what does Helen enjoy about her life as a professional swimmer? She says C, focusing on her main aims. At the start of the next question after, so now you've turned professional, what's that like? She says, I love being fit and challenging myself as an athlete. Now I've left school, I can concentrate on that 100%. Both A and B are then mentioned as distractions, but in the wrong sense. It's negative. She talks about being treated like a celebrity, but she doesn't like it. She doesn't find it a problem, but she says it does have its downsides. And she does talk about getting to travel, but actually living out of a suitcase isn't my idea of a good time. So A and B are mentioned, but in a negative way, so they're not the answers. And then finally in number 29, well not quite finally, but in 29, what has Helen found most difficult during her career? The answer we want is A, competing in her home area. She first talks about the other two things, dealing with losing races and recovering after injury. But for the injury, she says she's been fortunate because she hasn't anything too seriously. And she says that you feel miserable, but you have to stay strong. Not getting results is also tough, but this isn't the most difficult thing. Remember to look for the crucial language, the most important language in the question. Competing in her home area is most difficult because she says there's nothing worse than competing in front of a home crowd. And she marks all of this with the key word but. And so many times things revolve around the word but. If you hear some information and then but, be very aware of that, because but introduces a contradiction, a change of opinion, and it's usually what gives us the answer. And then Finally, number 30, Helen advises young swimmers to be realistic about their abilities. She says, if I say, if you keep trying kids, you can be like me, that sounds great, doesn't it? But it can't be true for everybody. It's important to learn from your own successes and failures because only you know what you're really capable of. So that's where we get the answer from. Okay, at the end of part 4, you'll have 5 minutes in which to transfer your answers from the question paper to the answer sheet. Now 5 minutes isn't long, so you'll have to work quickly. You have 30 answers to transfer. So you have to do it as quickly as you can, but do it carefully. There's nothing worse than having the right answer here, but putting it in the wrong place here, or introducing a spelling mistake, for example. So work carefully and quickly and make sure that you do it right. And that's it for the listening paper. Until next time, thank you very much and goodbye.